Hi, today I want to show you some mock-ups I've put together to explain an idea for a new project I may or may not work on. So what you see in front of you is a rough mock-up of a screen that a dungeon master would use to build scripted side quests for players in their game. Now, this all started when my brother and I were talking about how difficult it is to keep players engaged in the story with what's going on and also encouraging them to develop their backstory more with the DM when those players can't commit to like weekly games. Um, as many of you know, this hobby takes a lot of time and effort, or it can. And so when you have busy schedules and people have a lot of other commitments, it can be really hard to stay involved in a weekly game or even a bi-weekly game. But people still really want to play. And I really felt this myself when I had kids and I just didn't have as much free time anymore to engage with this amazing hobby. But I still would have liked to have been involved in some small way in an ongoing story, maybe in a smaller way, but in a way that was more to my convenience. So this is where it started. We're talking about how to keep people in the loop when they can't show up to a game every week. And I started learning more about this idea of downtime activities and sort of side quests and one-on-one role playing. And I found it really interesting. When I started looking into it, I found a lot of really good resources on it. People talked about it a lot, and it seems like this is something that a lot of players and game masters have already discovered and really enjoy doing. So I asked myself what this could look like with a system with software helping to let game masters prepare stories in advance and then run them with their players. And so what I've got here is this sort of a mashup of a choose your own adventure story and play by post. And what ties it all together is that it can be quickly created from scratch or from a template by a dungeon master so that each element in the story, in the flow, ties back to the character and the world. So let's just go through these mockups and I'll talk more about some of the features I thought up, and then you can tell me what you think in the comments. So this is like a screen, like a very rough and like unfinished screen of what a dungeon master might see when they're building out a quest. So let's see what some of the main points here would be. So yeah, essentially you're building side quests in a sort of flow editor, is what you'd call that thing. There's these purple sort of gates, I call them, on the left of some of the cards. These are triggers. So when a player gets to that point, that scene, you could perform some sort of action. For example, you could send yourself a notification to be like, hey, a player just got here to this point, and do you want to see what they've done so far? But it could do other cool stuff like maybe starting a timer if you wanted to have any sort of time trial or time-based pressure. Or even cooler is with the right APIs, you could potentially actually change your world. So if you have like your world set up in something like Legend Keeper, this system could have parts of the sort of database of your world like update to reflect actions happening in the side quest. Uh, I thought that would be, I'm sure there'd be many other uses for something like this. Um, there would be sort of opinionated, like lightweight systems for skill checks, puzzles, and combat. So this here is like an icon for like a skill check happening here. Um, Skill checks are pretty simple. I think combat would be interesting. I'm not sure quite yet how that would work, but in my opinion, doing the full scripted D&D combat system would be probably way too much and also kind of pointless because I don't, at least the way I imagine them today, I don't think side quests would ever like kill a player. So losing HP doesn't make much sense to me. So I imagine something much more streamlined and pared down that goes faster and gives you certain consequences. Like maybe if you lose the battle, so to speak, you come away with a sort of fatigued condition that the game master can see happened and can bring that into the start of your next session and work it into the story. Really not too many details on this yet. I think the main point is they should be lightweight, sort of simplified versions of these systems so that you're not just like hacking out combat with no real consequence. Um, the game master would be able to connect the quest to their campaign. Again, with the right APIs, especially, I could have places, people, things, articles, art from your world in a system like Legend Keeper. I could have them just instantly imported into this system with a few quick commands. So you could potentially receive like a template of a side quest, something that someone already wrote, and then you could kind of Mad Lib style go around and replace all of the proper nouns with things that actually matter to you, and maybe tweak the story a bit, maybe add a scene, and then you have a quest built almost instantly. Um, of course, the game master would be able to configure the rewards and consequences for quests. So in this example, um, there's a possibility of finding a magic item. And you can see here, maybe there's like a reputation system for this quest. In this quest, they're fetching meat from boars to feed the camp. So you could give reputation, make the camp like them better. The point is, would be totally configured by the game master, whatever they want. And this is the part think is pretty interesting and very curious to get feedback on. But you'd be able to go on autopilot. So the player is kind of doing a choose your own adventure with a robot, or you could do sort of real time one-on-one chat and role play between the game master and the player. And you could mix and match these potentially in this flow. So the way I show this here is there's this special purple card. And what would happen is this would all be automated. The player would start the quest, make choices, and proceed. And if they went down this path, they take the west road, they complete this skill challenge, they pass this skill challenge, it would hit this moment where it essentially has to go, the system would summon the dungeon master. So I think the way it would work narratively is like we would make sure that when this is going to happen, there's some sort of a clear kind of cliffhanger or like in story explanation for why the character has to kind of wait for a minute. And it's like, hold on. Your quest is kind of paused. We've notified your game master. And when they're going to text you when they're ready. And then so the game master, of course, would receive like an automatic transcript of everything you've done in this quest. So they get this notification, they can see everything you did. They're like, oh, perfect. They fell for that thing that I planted. I really want to role play this with them and develop their backstory here. And then, when they're ready, they just kind of text you and say, okay, let's go. And then you're just like role playing, uh, role playing through text the way you normally would, as much or as little as you want. If you're doing this in this system, of course, that entire scene is also tracked and recorded. And then the dungeon master sort of rewards you the end of the quest. In this branch, it seemed like there were some notes here, like, yeah, they wanted to remember to do some backstory development and award them this magic item. Yeah, so the idea is you could insert these scenes kind of wherever you want. You could maybe have a really long quest and have a few moments where they really want to role play it in person. The player experience, not very fleshed out yet, but essentially it would be play by post in a sort of real time chat interface, probably in something like Discord. So if you look closely, you'll see this is kind of just a mock-up of the bot running the quest with the player and asking them what choices they make and proceeding that way. It's really like a text-based RPG. Um, in this mock-up, we don't see the interaction with the real game master, but that would happen soon. Uh, an interesting part about this, which I think is an important part of why I thought of it in the first place, is you can do this on when it suits your schedule. You can come back and sort of, if you have a few minutes, you could start a side quest and sort of move through it at your own pace, so that you don't have to deal with difficult scheduling challenges. That's the whole point. And of course, you could do all the fun stuff like rolling dice to perform skill checks, solve puzzles, fight monsters, play the game. The system would certainly have a way to integrate seamlessly with your character sheet, wherever that is, probably D&D Beyond. But it would have all that information so that you could just, you wouldn't have to do all the math and stuff yourself. And then the system would definitely ask for you to type things in like role play, probably with like thought-provoking questions about your character or other little moments. And what this is doing is giving you a chance to practice your role playing, but it's also building up a highlight reel, which we'll talk about in a sec. Um, yeah, so at the end of a quest, you would be rewarded, you would get whatever the game master decided. And then this is, I think, an interesting part is that highlights from the quest as well, like the complete transcript of everything would go to the game master. And then some of the highlights would be pulled out in a nice format, sort of like a little presentation. Um, and it would include some of those like funny things you said when you were fighting the boar or whatever. And then you would be able to start your next session with the rest of the group with this highlight sheet. You could kind of tell the story of what happened and maybe share the highlights. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I don't know if I'm gonna build this. I would love to hear from you. Is it interesting? What am I missing? What am I onto? I think for me, the really interesting potential of something like this is to allow game masters to prepare in advance and move quickly to create an experience for their players that lets them really develop their characters and really do it at their own pace when schedules are crazy and just too hard to figure out. So that's it. Let me know what you think.